Her social media fame made her believe she was untouchable. With millions of followers watching her every move, slapping a royal guard seemed like the perfect viral moment. But when young Alexander Blackwood finally broke his stance, her act of disrespect unleashed a chain of events that would shake Windsor Castle to its core. Some say what happened next changed not just her life, but redefined what it means to wear the royal uniform. This is the story that captivated millions and reminded the world that true power lies not in followers, but in honor. Before we dive into this incredible story that left Britain speechless, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our daily doses of real-life karma and justice served. Now, let's begin. The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle's east wing, its ancient stones gleaming like polished bronze in the early light. It was no ordinary day at the historic fortress. The annual Royal Heritage Festival had drawn thousands from across the globe, transforming the usually serene grounds into a bustling celebration of British tradition. Among the sea of tourists and their clicking cameras stood 22-year-old Alexander Xander Blackwood, the youngest member of the Queen's Guard to ever earn his position through merit alone. His crimson uniform gleamed immaculately, each button polished to mirror-shine perfection. The bearskin cap sat proudly atop his head, adding to his already impressive height. But it wasn't just his appearance that set him apart. It was the weight of legacy he carried. His father, Commander James Blackwood, had served in the same position 30 years ago, earning decorations for valor that now hung in the Royal Military Museum. Today, unknown to the tourists snapping photos, was young Xander's 100th day of service, a milestone his father had marked with distinction 3 decades earlier. The white line before him, freshly painted for the festival, separated the public from the ceremonial guard post. Tour guides expertly shepherded their groups past, their rehearsed speeches floating through the air. The Queen's Guard represents over 500 years of British military tradition. Their stillness is not an act. It's a demonstration of the highest level of discipline. Xander maintained his position with statue-like precision, eyes fixed forward, managing to look both everywhere and nowhere at once, a skill passed down through generations of guards. His thoughts drifted momentarily to the morning's conversation with his father. "Son," Commander Blackwood had said, adjusting Xander's uniform with practiced hands, "today you carry not just your own honor, but the honor of all who stood before you. Remember, true strength isn't in how you respond to respect, but in how you handle disrespect." The festival crowds grew thicker as the morning wore on. Cameras flashed incessantly, children waved, and tourists tested their luck with various antics, all hoping to catch even a flicker of movement from the stoic guard. Xander remained unmoved, his discipline a testament to months of rigorous training. Through the corner of his eye, he noticed the usual mix of admirers, elderly veterans offering respectful nods, children pointing in wonder, and the occasional skeptics scoffing at what they perceived as mere pageantry. But there was something different in the air today, a buzz of excitement that seemed to grow with each passing minute. The source of that energy soon became apparent. A commotion near the castle gates signaled the arrival of someone who clearly commanded attention. Phones raised in unison as a woman in designer sunglasses and a flowing designer dress made her way through the crowd, her every movement being recorded by a professional cameraman trailing behind her. Vanessa Sinclair had arrived at Windsor Castle, and with her came the kind of chaos that only a social media influencer with 20 million followers could create. Her latest viral challenge, making stone-faced guards crack, had already earned her millions of views across platforms. But today she was hunting bigger game, the prestigious East Wing Guard post during the Royal Heritage Festival. Little did either Xander or Vanessa know, but their paths were about to collide in a way that would make headlines across the globe and teach a lesson about respect that neither would ever forget. The stage was set, the cameras were rolling, and the next few minutes would test not just a young guard's training, but the very principles that had guided his family's service for generations. Through it all, Xander Blackwood stood motionless, his father's words echoing in his mind. The sun continued its climb over Windsor Castle, its ancient walls harboring centuries of similar stories. of duty, honor, and the occasional clash between tradition and modern audacity. But what was about to unfold would be remembered long after the day's shadows had faded. Vanessa Sinclair wasn't just any social media influencer. She was a phenomenon. With her perfectly manicured nails tapping away at her phone's screen, she commanded an army of virtual followers larger than some small countries' populations. Her previous video, Making Buckingham Palace Guards Dance, had garnered 50 million views, though most viewers failed to notice how heavily edited the footage had been. Today, she moved through Windsor Castle's grounds like she owned them, her designer heels clicking against the ancient cobblestones with practiced precision. Her cameraman, Marcus, struggled to keep up while maintaining the perfect angle she demanded. Behind them trailed two assistants, one holding a ring light, the other clutching a tablet displaying Vanessa's real-time social media engagement metrics. "This is going to be epic, darlings," she announced to her live stream, her California accent contrasting sharply with the distinctly British atmosphere. "We are about to meet the famous Windsor Guards, and trust me, they won't know what hit them." The comment section exploded with anticipation, super chats flooding in from viewers eager to see what she'd do next. What none of her followers knew was that this wasn't just another stunt for views. Vanessa's numbers had been dropping lately, her content deemed too predictable by the ever-fickle algorithm. Her agent had been clear. She needed something explosive, something that would dominate news cycles for days. "In the attention economy," he told her, "controversy is currency." Meanwhile, Xander Blackwood maintained his vigil, though his awareness extended far beyond his fixed gaze. Years of training had honed his peripheral vision to near perfection. He could sense the approaching disturbance before he saw it, the shift in the crowd's energy, the increasing murmur of excited voices, the distinctive sound of expensive heels on stone. Through the corner of his eye, he caught glimpses of his fellow guard, Thomas Stonewall Bennett, positioned 50 yards away. Bennett had earned his nickname during the infamous protest incident of 2022, where he'd maintained his position for 6 hours straight without so much as a blink. Today, even Stonewall seemed to tense slightly at the approaching commotion. The morning sun now hung directly overhead, causing the brass buttons on Xander's uniform to gleam blindingly bright. Each button had been polished by hand that morning, just as his father had taught him. The top button held special significance. It was his father's original, passed down as a reminder of their shared legacy. Commander Blackwood's words from his graduation ceremony echoed in his mind. "Each button reflects our honor. Keep them bright enough to blind your critics." The crowd around his post had swelled to 3 times its usual size, drawn by Vanessa's magnetic presence and the promise of entertainment. Phones raised in a forest of extended arms, their screens creating a bizarre mirror maze of reflected sunlight. The air crackled with anticipation. "OMG, look at him!" Vanessa's voice cut through the general murmur as she approached, her tone carrying that particular pitch designed to attract attention. "He's like a real-life Ken doll, right? But let's see if we can make him a bit more animated." Her livestream comment section exploded with emojis and encouragement. Marcus, her cameraman, circled to find the perfect angle, his professional camera making the tourists' phones look like toys in comparison. The ring light assistant positioned herself to eliminate any unflattering shadows from Vanessa's face. Presentation was everything in her world. What happened next would later be analyzed frame by frame across social media platforms worldwide. Vanessa, playing to her audience, began a calculated performance of escalating provocations. But she failed to notice something that the more observant members of the crowd had picked up on: the subtle shift in Xander's jaw muscle, the microscopic tightening of his grip on his rifle, the almost imperceptible straightening of his already perfect posture. Among the crowd, an elderly man in a weathered military jacket watched the scene unfold with growing concern. Former Sergeant Major William Hayes had served with Commander Blackwood, and he recognized young Xander from family photographs. He could read the signs that Vanessa, in her pursuit of viral fame, was completely missing. The tension in the air grew thick enough to cut with a knife. Tourists who had come hoping for a quick photo now found themselves unwitting spectators to what felt increasingly like an imminent collision between two very different worlds: the ancient traditions of the Queen's Guard and the brash new age of social media influence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Stonewall Bennett, from his position, maintained his characteristic stillness, but those who knew him well would have recognized the subtle tell in his left eyebrow, the same tell that had preceded the infamous incident of 2022. The stage was set for something unprecedented, and everyone could feel it. As the warm summer breeze carried the distant chimes of Windsor Chapel across the grounds, marking the approach of noon, no one in the gathered crowd could have predicted exactly how the next few minutes would unfold. But one thing was certain: the clash between Vanessa Sinclair's pursuit of viral fame and Alexander Blackwood's dedication to centuries of tradition was about to create a moment that would be remembered for years to come. "Okay, my lovely followers." Vanessa's voice rang out across the courtyard, her phone held at the perfect angle to capture both her face and the stoic guard behind her. "Today, we're going to conduct a little experiment. How long does it take to make one of these famous guards show some personality?" The crowd's reaction was immediate and mixed. Some tourists stepped back, creating a small clearing around her, while others pressed forward, phones ready to capture whatever might unfold. The ring light assistant adjusted her position, ensuring Vanessa remained perfectly illuminated despite the shifting shadows of the gathering clouds overhead. "First test. Let's see if he responds to basic questions," Vanessa announced to her live stream, which had now swelled to over 50,000 concurrent viewers. Her engagement metrics were skyrocketing, each notification ping from her assistant's tablet fueling her confidence. "Hey there, handsome," she called out, positioning herself just shy of the white line. "Do they pay you extra to look this serious, or is it just natural talent?" A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the crowd, quickly followed by an uncomfortable silence as Xander maintained his unwavering forward gaze. Marcus, her cameraman, circled to capture multiple angles, his expensive camera whirring softly. "Get his face," Vanessa commanded in a stage whisper that carried clearly across the courtyard. "I want everyone to see when he finally breaks." In the growing crowd, former Sergeant Major Hayes shifted uneasily. He'd seen that same stance in Commander Blackwood years ago, right before the Christmas Eve incident of '95 that veterans still talked about in hushed tones. Young Xander's bearing was eerily similar to his father's, right down to the slight tension in his trigger finger that only a trained eye would notice. "Maybe he's shy," Vanessa continued, her voice taking on a mock-sympathetic tone that her followers had come to love. "Should we help him overcome his stage fright? Drop some hearts in the chat if you think we should." The response was immediate. Her live stream exploded with digital hearts and encouraging comments. A young girl in the crowd tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, why is that lady being mean to the guard?" The question, innocent and clear, carried across the sudden lull in ambient noise. Several onlookers exchanged knowing glances, the child's simple observation cutting through the artificial excitement of the moment. Stonewall Bennett, from his position, maintained his legendary composure, but his years of experience told him something was different about this situation. The usual tourist antics followed a predictable pattern. This felt more calculated, more deliberately provocative. His internal alarm bells, honed by decades of service, were ringing. "Let's try something else," Vanessa announced, her voice rising with theatrical flair. She gestured to one of her assistants, who hurried forward with a small Bluetooth speaker. The opening notes of "God Save the King" began playing, but with a remixed beat that bordered on disrespectful. The crowd's reaction was visceral. Several elderly visitors turned away in disgust, while a group of younger tourists began filming with increased interest. A middle-aged man in a veteran's cap shook his head slowly, his disapproval evident in every line of his face. Through it all, Xander remained motionless, but his mind was racing. His father's training echoed in his thoughts. "The uniform doesn't just represent you, son. It represents every guard who's ever stood watch, every soldier who's ever served, and every principle we've sworn to protect." The music continued, its distorted version of the national anthem creating an increasingly tense atmosphere. Vanessa, encouraged by her soaring viewer count, decided to escalate further. She began an exaggerated march in front of Xander, her designer heels clicking against the cobblestones in mock imitation of the ceremonial guard march. "Look, everyone," she called out to her stream. "I think I'm getting the hang of this. Maybe they'll recruit me for the next changing of the guard." Her performance was punctuated by the constant pinging of super chat donations and new follower alerts from her assistant's tablet. What Vanessa failed to notice, but Sergeant Major Hayes observed with growing concern, was the subtle change in the air around Xander. His stillness had transformed from ceremonial to something else entirely, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. It was the same stillness Hayes had witnessed in combat, in those crucial moments before action became inevitable. The chapel bells began tolling noon, their solemn tones clashing with the distorted music from Vanessa's speaker. The sound seemed to mark a turning point, a moment where the playful manipulation of social media collided head-on with centuries of unwavering tradition. In that moment, as the last bell tone faded, something in the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. Thunder rumbled in the distance, as if nature itself was providing a soundtrack to the mounting tension. The growing crowd, now numbering well over 100, seemed to collectively hold its breath, sensing that Vanessa's experiment was about to take an unexpected turn. What had started as another social media stunt was rapidly evolving into something far more significant. A clash of values that would soon reverberate far beyond the ancient walls of Windsor Castle. The first droplets of rain began to fall, creating dark spots on the ancient cobblestones of Windsor Castle's courtyard. The weather seemed to mirror the darkening mood of the gathering crowd, but Vanessa Sinclair saw it as just another opportunity for content creation. "Quick, Marcus, get this," she called to her cameraman. "The aesthetics are perfect. Moody sky, stoic guard, dramatic tension." She ran her fingers through her perfectly styled hair, letting the light rain add what she considered a photogenic gloss. Her engagement numbers were climbing exponentially, the constant pinging of notifications creating an electronic undertone to the natural rainfall. "Let's step this up a notch," she announced to her live stream, now approaching 100,000 viewers. "Time for Phase 2 of Operation Stoneface." She gestured to her second assistant, who rushed forward with a small makeup bag. The crowd watched, a mix of fascination and discomfort evident on their faces, as Vanessa touched up her makeup while continuing her running commentary. "You know what I think?" she addressed her audience, voice pitched to Carrie. "I think these guards are just actors. I mean, look at this one. He's like a Madame Tussauds exhibit, right?" She approached the white line again, this time standing so close her designer shoes nearly touched it. No real soldier would just stand there while someone did. This. She pulled out a compact mirror and positioned it to reflect the sunlight directly into Xander's eyes. The crowd gasped, but Xander didn't flinch. His training kicked in automatically, subtle micro-adjustments in his eye muscles preventing the light from affecting his vision, a technique passed down through generations of guards. Sergeant Major Hayes had seen enough. He stepped forward, his weathered military bearing commanding immediate attention. "Young lady," his voice carried the weight of decades of service. "That line isn't just paint on stone, it's a boundary between respect and ignorance." Vanessa spun around, her face lighting up at this new development. "Oh my God, followers, we have a plot twist. Random Grandpa wants to join our little show." Her assistant quickly adjusted the ring light to include Hayes in the shot. But Hayes wasn't finished. "That uniform you're mocking? It's worn by men and women who've sworn to give their lives to protect what it represents. That stone face you're trying to break? It's the face of dedication that's guarded our traditions for centuries." The crowd had grown eerily quiet, phones still recording but their owners now captivated by this unexpected confrontation. Even Marcus, Vanessa's cameraman, found himself lowering his professional camera slightly, caught up in the gravity of the moment. "Tradition?" Vanessa scoffed, but there was a slight tremor in her voice. "Welcome to 2025, Grandpa. Everything's content now. These guards? They're just part of the tourist experience. Watch." She turned back to Xander, Her confidence bolstered by the surge in viewer numbers, her metrics assistant was frantically signaling. What happened next would later be debated across social media platforms worldwide. Vanessa took a deliberate step back as if preparing for something. Her live stream chat exploded with speculation and encouragement. The rain had intensified slightly, creating a misty backdrop that seemed to blur the line between ceremony and spectacle. Stonewall Bennett, from his post, noticed a subtle change in Xander's stance, imperceptible to untrained eyes but clear as day to a veteran guard. It was the same minute shift he'd seen in guards moments before they'd been forced to break protocol in extreme situations. His own muscles tensed involuntarily, years of shared experience telling him something significant was about to unfold. In the crowd, a young boy who'd been quietly watching the scene suddenly spoke up, his voice carrying the innocent wisdom of youth. "Dad, isn't she bullying him? You said bullies only act tough because they're scared inside." The comment rippled through the gathered spectators, causing several people to lower their phones in reflection. Vanessa, however, was too focused on her metrics to notice the shifting mood. Her latest post had already gone viral. "Making history at Windsor, watch till the end." The engagement was unprecedented, each notification driving her further into her performance. "Time for the grand finale," she announced to her stream. "Let's see if Mr. Perfect Guard here can keep his composure through this." She reached into her designer bag, pulling out what appeared to be a water bottle. The crowd's murmuring intensified as they realized her intent. Sergeant Major Hayes started forward, but he was too far away. Several other onlookers moved to intervene, but they too were caught in that paralyzing moment between recognition and action. The rain continued to fall, each drop seeming to echo in the tense silence that had fallen over the courtyard. Xander remained motionless, but in his mind, time had slowed to a crawl. He could feel the weight of his father's button on his uniform, could hear the chapel bells in the distance marking the quarter hour, could sense the collective intake of breath from the crowd. Years of training had prepared him for physical challenges, but this was different. This was a test of everything the uniform represented. The atmosphere in Windsor Castle's courtyard had transformed from tourist curiosity to collective unease. The growing crowd, now numbering well over 200, had split into distinct factions. Near the front, Vanessa's devoted followers, mostly younger tourists with their phones held high, continued encouraging her escalating behavior. But around them, a ring of disapproving observers had formed, their muttered comments creating a rising tide of criticism. "This is absolutely disgraceful," whispered a woman in a Royal Artillery Association blazer to her companion. Her voice, though low, carried enough to be picked up by several nearby phones. "My daughter serves in the Royal Regiment, and this mockery is an insult to everyone who's ever worn the uniform." The rain continued its steady descent, but few in the crowd made any move to seek shelter. The weathered stone walls of Windsor Castle had witnessed centuries of history, but today they were bearing witness to a very modern conflict, the clash between viral fame and venerated tradition. Marcus, Vanessa's cameraman, found himself in an unexpected ethical dilemma. As a professional videographer who'd covered everything from war zones to fashion weeks, he recognized the telltale signs of a situation spiraling out of control. His camera captured the subtle shifts in the crowd's body language. People stepping back, parents pulling children closer, security guards speaking quietly into their radios. "I don't think this is a good idea anymore," he muttered to Vanessa's assistant, lowering his camera slightly. But the assistant, eyes glued to the engagement metrics tablet, merely shook her head. "The numbers are insane," she whispered back. "We're trending #1 in 3 countries." In the middle of the growing chaos, Stonewall Bennett maintained his post with characteristic stillness, but his decades of experience were setting off every internal alarm. He'd seen that particular tension in a guard's stance only twice before in his career. Once during the infamous royal wedding protest of 2011, and again during the flag incident of 2019. Both times, what followed had made international headlines. A group of Japanese tourists who had been quietly observing the scene began to leave, bowing slightly toward Xander as they departed, a silent show of respect that spoke volumes. Their quiet dignity created a stark contrast to Vanessa's increasingly theatrical performance. "Look at how everyone's so serious," Vanessa called out to her live stream, her voice carrying a slight edge of desperation as she sensed the shifting mood. "Don't worry, followers. We're about to wake everyone up. Drop some emojis if you're ready for the main event." Her words triggered an immediate reaction from Sergeant Major Hayes. The decorated veteran stepped forward again, his voice cutting through the patter of rain with parade ground authority. "Young lady, there's a line between entertainment and disrespect, and you're about to cross it in more ways than one." The crowd's murmuring intensified. Phones that had been recording Vanessa now turned to capture Hayes, sensing that his words carried the weight of history. Among the spectators, a young military cadet in civilian clothes was frantically texting, his fingers flying over his phone's keyboard as he documented everything for his unit's group chat. "Oh my God, is he still talking?" Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically for her camera. "Someone tell Grandpa here that his generation's time is over. This is the age of social media, everything's content." But beneath her practiced bravado, a note of uncertainty had crept into her voice. A mother in the crowd covered her young daughter's eyes, but the girl peeked through her fingers, instinctively understanding that she was witnessing something significant. "Mummy," she whispered loudly enough for those nearby to hear, "the guard looks like the statue of the soldier in Grandfather's study. The one you said was a hero." The comment rippled through the crowd, causing several people to look at Xander with new eyes. Despite the escalating situation, his posture remained perfect, his discipline unwavering. The rain had begun to soak through his red uniform, but he might as well have been carved from the same stone as Windsor Castle itself. Thunder rumbled overhead, closer now, as if nature itself was providing a warning. Vanessa's engagement metrics continued to soar, her assistant's tablet pinging incessantly with new followers and super chat donations. But the comments section had begun to shift, with more and more viewers expressing discomfort with the escalating situation. "Remember what happened to that influencer at Buckingham Palace last year?" someone in the crowd called out. "They banned her for life." But Vanessa was too far committed to her performance to heed the warning. Her career had been built on pushing boundaries, and today's viral moment promised to be her biggest yet. What none of the onlookers realized was that among them stood an off-duty palace press officer, quietly documenting everything on her phone. She'd already sent several urgent messages to her superiors, knowing that what was unfolding would require careful handling in the aftermath. The tension in the air had become almost unbearable. Even the most casual tourist could sense that they were witnessing more than just another social media stunt. This was rapidly becoming a moment that would be discussed in guard training sessions for years to come. The only question was, how would it end? The next few moments would later be dissected frame by frame across social media platforms worldwide. The rain had intensified, creating a misty curtain that seemed to separate the ancient world of Windsor Castle from the modern spectacle unfolding within its walls. Vanessa Sinclair, her designer dress now dampened by the rain, made a decision that would change not just her life, but redefine the boundaries between viral fame and sacred tradition. "Okay, my amazing followers," she announced, her voice carrying an edge of theatrical excitement. "We've tried being nice, we've tried being funny, but Mr. Perfect Guard here just won't play along. Time to show everyone what it takes to go viral in 2025. She gestured to her assistant, who reluctantly handed her a small bag. Sergeant Major Hayes recognized the look in her eyes. He'd seen it countless times in his military career, the moment when someone commits to a course of action from which there's no return. "Miss," he called out, one final attempt at intervention. "Think very carefully about your next move. Some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed." But Vanessa was beyond hearing warnings. Her metrics assistant had just signaled that they'd broken her previous viral record. The live stream chat was exploding with anticipation, super chat donations pouring in faster than the falling rain. In her mind, she was already visualizing the headlines her actions would generate. Marcus, her cameraman, made one last attempt to prevent what he could see coming. "Vanessa, maybe we should..." But she cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Just keep filming. This is what they want." She pointed to her soaring viewer count. "This is what they're paying for." The crowd had grown even larger, drawn by the palpable tension in the air. Among them, the off-duty palace press officer was now recording everything on 2 devices, understanding that what was about to happen would require meticulous documentation. The young military cadet had stopped texting, his face a mask of concern as he recognized the signs of an imminent incident. Xander Blackwood remained motionless, but beneath his stoic exterior, his mind was racing through years of training. His father's words echoed in his thoughts. The uniform isn't just cloth and buttons, son. It's a symbol of everything we stand for. How you wear it tells the world who we are. Vanessa pulled something from her bag that made several people in the crowd gasp. A small spray bottle filled with what appeared to be water, but the rainbow sheen on its surface suggested something more. "Let's see if we can add some color to this boring uniform," she announced to her stream. "Drop some rainbow emojis if you're ready for a makeover." "That's enough." The sharp command came from Stonewall Bennett's direction, but he hadn't broken his stance. Instead, a distinguished-looking man in a tailored suit had emerged from the crowd, Commander James Blackwood himself, who had been quietly observing the scene unfold. The appearance of Xander's father sent a new wave of murmurs through the spectators. But Vanessa was too far gone in her performance to register the significance of the new arrival. "Oh look, another party crasher," she laughed, playing to her camera. "Don't worry, everyone. There's enough content for everyone. Now, let's see how our guard friend handles a little splash of color." Commander Blackwood's face hardened as he watched the scene unfold. He knew better than anyone what his son was experiencing. The weight of tradition, the test of discipline, the battle between duty and instinct. He'd stood that same post 30 years ago, faced similar challenges, made choices that had defined his career. The rain continued to fall, creating a curtain of mist that seemed to transform the courtyard into a stage. Lightning flashed in the distance, briefly illuminating the ancient stones of Windsor Castle, as if history itself was bearing witness to this moment of collision between old world and new. Vanessa raised the spray bottle, her other hand still holding her phone to capture every moment. "Time for the grand finale," she announced to her stream. "Let's make this guard's uniform match my aesthetic." She took another step forward, definitively crossing the white line that had been her last boundary between mischief and malice. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Phones raised higher, cameras clicked rapidly, and several security radios crackled to life. Commander Blackwood started forward, his military bearing evident in every movement, but he knew he wouldn't reach her in time. The young military cadet had pulled out his phone again, but this time he was dialing, not texting. In that moment, as Vanessa prepared to spray the unknown substance towards his uniform, Xander Blackwood felt the weight of generations of service pressing down upon him. The brass button at his collar, his father's button, seemed to grow heavier. His training had prepared him for physical threats, but this was different. This was a challenge not just to him, but to everything the uniform represented. The tension in the air had reached its breaking point. Even Vanessa's most ardent online supporters had begun to comment that things had gone too far. Marcus had lowered his professional camera, his years of experience telling him that what was about to happen shouldn't be filmed. But Vanessa, caught up in the momentum of her viral moment, was beyond such concerns. 3, 2, 1. She counted down for her audience, the spray bottle aimed directly at Xander's chest. "Time to go viral, Mr. Guard." What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms worldwide. As Vanessa's finger tightened on the spray bottle's trigger, something unexpected occurred. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the courtyard, catching her designer dress and momentarily throwing her off balance. In that split second of recovery, her frustration at the interruption of her perfectly staged moment boiled over. "Oh, come on!" she snapped, dropping the spray bottle. The sound of plastic clattering against ancient cobblestones echoed through the courtyard. Then, in a moment of impulsive rage that would haunt her social media career forever, Vanessa Sinclair did the unthinkable. Her manicured hand shot out, delivering a sharp slap to Xander Blackwood's face. The sound cracked across the courtyard like a gunshot. Time seemed to freeze. The falling rain appeared to hang suspended in the air. Every phone, every camera, Every eye was fixed on that singular point of contact, the perfectly manicured hand against the stoic guard's cheek. The red mark blooming on his skin matched the crimson of his uniform. Commander Blackwood's sharp intake of breath was audible in the sudden silence. Stonewall Bennett's legendary composure cracked for a microsecond, his eyes widening in disbelief. Sergeant Major Hayes muttered something that sounded like a prayer, but it was Marcus, Vanessa's own cameraman, who broke the spell. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, lowering his camera completely. "What have you done?" His words carried clearly in the stunned silence, triggering a cascade of reactions from the crowd. "She actually hit him. Someone call security. Tell me you got that on video. This is assault." Vanessa, momentarily startled by her own action, quickly tried to recover her social media personality. "Oh my God, you guys," she trilled to her live stream, her voice slightly higher than usual. "I can't believe I just did that. Make sure you like and share." Her words were cut short by a sound that made everyone in the courtyard freeze again. It was a sound that veterans in the crowd recognized instantly, the sharp click of a ceremonial rifle being adjusted. Xander Blackwood, for the first time since taking his post that morning, had moved. The movement was precise, deliberate, and carried the weight of centuries of military tradition. His head turned, ever so slightly, until his eyes met Vanessa's. The look in those eyes would later be described by witnesses as enough to freeze hell itself. Commander Blackwood stepped forward, his military bearing radiating authority. "Young lady," his voice cut through the rain like a blade, "you have just assaulted a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces while on active duty. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done?" Vanessa's live stream chat exploded with comments, but for once they weren't the supportive emoji spam she was used to. Her metrics assistant's tablet was pinging frantically, but now with messages of a different kind. Did she just assault a royal guard? This is going to end her career. Someone arrest her. Unsubscribed. The rain continued to fall, but no one in the courtyard moved. The young military cadet had finished his phone call and the results were immediate. The sound of rapid footsteps on wet stone announced the arrival of Windsor Castle's security detail. Vanessa, suddenly realizing the magnitude of her actions, took a step back. Her phone, still live streaming, captured her expression changing from confidence to concern. "It was just a joke," she stammered, her social media persona cracking. "Everyone knows these guards are just for show, right? It's all part of the tourist experience." "Just for show?" The words came from Sergeant Major Hayes, who stepped forward with the measured pace of a man who had served in 3 conflicts. "That uniform you just disrespected has been worn by soldiers who gave their lives protecting what it represents. That man you just struck stands in a line of guardsmen stretching back centuries. They've stood watch through wars, through peace, through every moment of our nation's history." The security team had formed a circle around Vanessa now, their faces stern. Her assistants had backed away, Marcus still holding his lowered camera. The ring light lay forgotten on the wet cobblestones, its artificial illumination creating ghostly reflections in the puddles. Then, in a moment that would be gift and shared millions of times, Xander Blackwood moved again. With perfect precision, he resumed his forward stance. But something had changed. His posture, if possible, had become even more rigidly perfect, as if he was not just standing guard over Windsor Castle, but over the very dignity of his position. A police officer had arrived now, speaking quietly into his radio as he assessed the situation. Vanessa's live stream was still running, capturing every moment of her downfall in real time. Her viewer count had skyrocketed, but not for the reasons she'd hoped. The #sign Windsor Guard assault was already trending. Windsor Castle's ancient courtyard had witnessed countless historic moments over the centuries, but none quite like this. The rain continued its steady descent, creating a shimmering curtain that seemed to separate the world into before and after. For what felt like an eternity but was probably only seconds, the entire courtyard held its breath. Vanessa's handprint stood out stark red against Xander's cheek, a mark of disrespect that seemed to glow against his stern features. The sound of the slap still seemed to echo off the castle walls, mixing with the gentle patter of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Time itself appeared to have slowed to a crawl, as if history needed a moment to process what had just occurred. Commander Blackwood's face had transformed into a mask of controlled fury. As a veteran of countless military operations, he'd faced down threats from armed insurgents to diplomatic crises, but watching his son endure this public assault tested his discipline like never before. His hand unconsciously touched his chest, where his own medals usually sat, a gesture not lost on the veterans in the crowd. Stonewall Bennett, from his position 50 yards away, maintained his legendary stillness, but his eyes tracked every movement in the courtyard. In his 30 years of service, he'd never witnessed such a direct challenge to the dignity of the Guard. His peripheral vision caught glimpses of palace security converging from multiple directions, moving with practiced efficiency through the stunned crowd. The young military cadet who had made the call earlier now stood with his phone recording everything, his face a mixture of outrage and awe. "The regiment needs to see this," he muttered to himself. "Every new Guard needs to see how he handles this." Vanessa's live stream continued to broadcast, but the tone of the comments had shifted dramatically. Her phone's screen was now flooding with messages of condemnation. Did she really just assault a royal guard? This is disgusting. She needs to be arrested. Unsubscribe. This isn't content, this is a crime. Marcus, her cameraman, had completely lowered his professional camera, but his years of photojournalism experience told him he was witnessing something historic. His fingers itched to raise the camera again, not for Vanessa's content, but for posterity. This was a moment that would be discussed in media ethics classes for years to come. The off-duty palace press officer had already sent multiple urgent messages to her superiors, her fingers flying over her phone's keyboard. Situation critical at East Wing Post. Guard assaulted. Multiple witnesses. Full social media coverage. Awaiting response protocol. She knew the palace's response would need to be swift and decisive. Sergeant Major Hayes had moved closer to Commander Blackwood, the two veterans exchanging glances that spoke volumes. They'd both stood guard in their time. Both faced their share of tourist provocations. But this was different. This was a direct assault on everything the uniform represented. The rain seemed to fall harder now, but nobody in the crowd made any move to seek shelter. The water draped the scene in a surreal glow, refracting through the abandoned ring light and creating halos around the phones still raised to capture every moment. Camera flashes punctuated the gray day like distant lightning. In the tense silence, a child's voice carried clearly, "Mummy, why did the bad lady hit the soldier?" The innocent question seemed to break some sort of spell. The crowd, which had been frozen in shock, began to stir. Murmurs of disapproval grew louder. Phones were raised higher and security radios crackled with increased urgency. Vanessa's assistant, still clutching the metrics tablet, watched in horror as the numbers told their own story. Followers were unfollowing in real time, sponsor contracts were being publicly canceled via Twitter, and her carefully curated social media empire was crumbling with each passing second. The most remarkable element of the tableau, however, remained Xander Blackwood himself. The red mark on his cheek stood out vividly against his pale skin, but his posture hadn't wavered by so much as a millimeter. His eyes, fixed forward with parade ground precision, seemed to look through the present moment into history itself, as if seeking guidance from every guard who had ever worn the uniform before him. Thunder rolled overhead, closer now, as if the heavens themselves were pronouncing judgment. The ancient stones of Windsor Castle, darkened by rain, seemed to loom larger, their centuries-old presence a reminder of the permanence of tradition in the face of fleeting social media fame. In this suspended moment, as security closed in and cameras recorded, the fundamental clash between ancient duty and modern celebrity hung in the air like the mist. Everyone present could sense that what happened next would resonate far beyond the castle walls, far beyond the viral videos and trending hashtags, into the very heart of what it meant to stand guard over tradition in a world obsessed with instant gratification. The transformation began with a single movement, precise, controlled, and absolutely deliberate. Xander Blackwood's head turned exactly 45 degrees to his left, his eyes focusing directly on Vanessa Sinclair with laser-like intensity. The motion, executed with parade ground precision, carried more impact than any sudden gesture could have achieved. "Step back behind the line." His voice, when it came, was not the angry shout many had expected, but rather a calm, measured command that seemed to echo off the castle walls. It carried the weight of centuries, the authority of tradition, and the unmistakable steel of military discipline. "You have committed an assault on a member of His Majesty's Guard. Remain where you are until authorities arrive." The crowd collectively gasped. In all the viral videos of guard interactions that had come before, none had captured this kind of response. Controlled, professional, yet undeniably powerful. Even Stonewall Bennett, watching from his post, felt a surge of pride. This was how it was done. Commander Blackwood's face showed a flash of recognition. It was the same tone he had used 30 years ago during the Christmas Eve incident. Firm, authoritative, but never losing composure. His son had learned well. Vanessa, still holding her phone in livestream mode, attempted to recover her social media persona. "Oh my God, you guys, he actually spoke. We did it. Don't forget to like and—" "Madam." Xander's second word cut through her performance like a knife through butter. "Lower your phone. This is now a criminal matter." Each word was enunciated with crystal clarity, his accent carrying the polished edges of Sandhurst Military Academy training. The off-duty palace press officer, who had been documenting everything, couldn't help but smile. This was perfect. Professional, proportional, and precisely by the book. Her thumbs flew across her phone's keyboard. "Situation under control. Guard response exemplary. Recommend immediate press release highlighting disciplined reaction to unprovoked assault." Security officers had now formed a complete circle around the scene. One of them, a veteran of diplomatic protection, spoke into his radio. "Subject contained. Requesting police presence for formal arrest. Guard standing firm, situation stable." Through it all, Xander maintained perfect posture, the only movement being his head's precise angle and his speaking. The red mark on his cheek seemed to glow brighter against his stoic features, but rather than diminishing his authority, it somehow enhanced it, a battle scar earned in the line of duty. Marcus, who had filmed countless social media stunts, found himself lowering his camera in respect. "That's how it's done," he muttered, before turning to Vanessa's assistant. "I quit. Some things shouldn't be content." The assistant, still clutching her metrics tablet, barely noticed his departure, transfixed by the unfolding scene. Sergeant Major Hayes moved to stand beside Commander Blackwood, both men watching with professional appreciation, as Xander continued to control the situation through sheer force of disciplined presence. "Like father, like son," Hayes murmured, the uniforms in good hands. The rain had begun to ease, as if nature itself was stepping back to better observe what was unfolding. Sunlight broke through the clouds, catching on the brass buttons of Xander's uniform. The top button, his father's button, seemed to gleam with particular brightness. Vanessa's livestream followers watched in real time as her carefully constructed online personality crumbled in the face of real-world consequences. Her phone shook slightly in her hand as she finally began to comprehend the gravity of her actions. The comments section of her stream had become a tsunami of criticism. "This is what real dignity looks like. Now that's a true professional. Best guard response ever." She messed with the wrong soldier. A young girl in the crowd tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, is this what you meant about quiet strength?" The question carried in the hushed courtyard, causing several onlookers to nod in agreement. This was indeed a masterclass in controlled power. Police officers had arrived now, moving through the crowd with practiced efficiency. But before they could reach Vanessa, Xander delivered his final words, each one measured and clear. "Let the record show that at 11:47 a.m., the subject assaulted a member of His Majesty's Guard during the execution of his duties. The guard maintained position and protocol throughout the incident. God save the King." The formal declaration, delivered with perfect military precision, transformed what could have been a mere social media scandal into a moment of historic significance. Several veterans in the crowd unconsciously straightened their postures, recognizing the importance of what they were witnessing. After completing his declaration, Xander resumed his forward stance, his movement so precise it seemed choreographed. The only evidence of the assault remained the red mark on his cheek, a mark that would be photographed, documented, and eventually used in training materials for future guards as an example of perfect professional conduct under provocation. The arrival of the police brought a new layer of authority to the rain-soaked courtyard of Windsor Castle. Two officers, their uniforms pristine despite the weather, approached the scene with measured steps. Detective Inspector Sarah Collins, a veteran of Diplomatic Protection Services, took immediate control of the situation. "Madam, I am placing you under arrest for assaulting a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces," she announced, her voice carrying the same professional calm that Xander had displayed. "You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence." Vanessa's phone, still live streaming, captured the moment her social media empire began to crumble. "Wait, what? Arrested? But this was just content. It was just for..." Her words were cut short as Detective Inspector Collins carefully but firmly took the phone from her hand, ending the live stream that had documented her downfall. "Ms. Sinclair," the detective continued, checking her tablet, "we have been monitoring your social media broadcasts throughout this incident. Your actions were clearly premeditated and documented by your own hand. Please place your hands behind your back." The crowd watched in stunned silence as handcuffs clicked around the wrists that had, moments ago, struck a royal guard. Vanessa's designer dress, now thoroughly soaked by the rain, had lost all its glamour. Her carefully crafted image of social media invincibility shattered with each professional movement of the police officers. Commander Blackwood approached Detective Inspector Collins, his military bearing matching her professional demeanor. "I would like to formally press charges on behalf of the regiment," he stated, producing identification that made the detective's eyebrows raise slightly. "Furthermore, we have multiple witnesses, including several veteran officers and complete video documentation." The off-duty palace press officer stepped forward, holding up her phone. "The palace's legal team has been notified and is preparing a formal statement. We have archived copies of the entire live stream, including Ms. Sinclair's stated intentions before the assault." Marcus, who had remained to witness the aftermath, surrendered his professional camera to the police. "I have everything from the moment we arrived," he said quietly, including her planning discussions before approaching the guard post. His action drew a betrayed look from Vanessa's assistant, who was still clutching her metrics tablet like a shield. Detective Inspector Collins nodded professionally. "Excellent. This will make the Crown Prosecution Service's job considerably easier." She turned to her colleague. "Constable, please escort Ms. Sinclair to the vehicle. We'll need statements from all witnesses." As Vanessa was led away, her former confidence completely evaporated. A young police constable began collecting contact information from the crowd. The young military cadet who had made the initial call stepped forward first, followed by Sergeant Major Hayes and several other veterans who had witnessed the entire incident. Stonewall Bennett, maintaining his post with characteristic stillness, allowed himself the smallest nod of satisfaction. In all his years of service, he had never seen a situation handled with more perfect precision, both by the young guard and by the responding authorities. The palace press officer's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Her eyes widened slightly as she read it. "The palace is issuing an immediate statement," she announced to Detective Inspector Collins. "They're commending the guard's professional response and taking a zero-tolerance stance on assaults against military personnel." Commander Blackwood stood near his son's post, pride warring with concern on his face. The red mark on Xander's cheek had begun to fade, but the symbolism of the moment had only grown stronger. Security cameras swiveled to maintain coverage of the scene, their presence a reminder that every moment in the castle grounds was preserved for history. Vanessa's abandoned ring light created an ironic halo effect on the wet cobblestones, its artificial illumination now serving only to highlight the evidence being photographed by police forensics. Her assistant, finally accepting the gravity of the situation, handed over the metrics tablet to the police without resistance. "All the planning messages are in there," she said quietly. "Everything." Detective Inspector Collins surveyed the scene with experienced eyes. "In 15 years of diplomatic protection, I've never seen a guard handle provocation more professionally," she commented to Commander Blackwood. "Your son's response will be used in training seminars for years to come." The rain had finally stopped, and rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, creating a dramatic backdrop against Windsor Castle's ancient walls. Tourists who had witnessed the entire incident were already uploading their videos, but now the narrative had shifted completely. Instead of the viral prank Vanessa had planned, the story becoming guards' perfect response to assault was spreading across social media platforms. As the police vehicle carrying Vanessa disappeared through the castle gates, the crowd began to disperse, but not before many of them paused to snap one final photo. Not of the guard post or the scene of the incident, but of the moment when tradition and dignity had prevailed over the pursuit of viral fame. By sunset, the incident at Windsor Castle had exploded across every major social media platform. The hashtag #Windsor Guard Honor was trending globally, accompanied by #Respect Tradition and Vanessa Sinclair Cancelled. The video clips, captured from dozens of angles by tourists and professional cameras alike, painted a comprehensive picture of dignity in the face of disrespect. Major news networks had picked up the story, their broadcasts featuring side-by-side comparisons of Vanessa's livestream footage and bystander videos. BBC News ran a special segment titled, "Tradition Stands Firm, The Windsor Castle Incident," featuring interviews with military historians and social media experts, analyzing the clash between ancient protocol and modern influencer culture. Inside the newsroom of The Times, veteran royal correspondent Elizabeth Hartley was putting the finishing touches on tomorrow's front-page story. "Dignity Under Fire, Royal Guard's Response." Captures nation's heart. In an age where viral fame often trumps traditional values, a young Queen's Guard demonstrated that some institutions stand unmoved by the shifting sands of social media culture. Alexander Xander Blackwood, following in his father's footsteps, showed the world what true strength looks like, not through force but through unwavering discipline. The palace's official social media accounts released a formal statement that quickly became their most engaged post of the year. Windsor Castle today witnessed not just an assault on a guard, but an attempt to diminish the dignified traditions that have long protected our heritage. The professional response of Guard Blackwood exemplifies the highest standards of military service. The palace commends his conduct and reaffirms our zero-tolerance policy toward any abuse of military personnel. On military bases across the country, the video became an instant training tool. At Sandhurst Military Academy, instructors were already incorporating the incident into their lessons on diplomatic protection and public duty. "Notice the perfect posture maintained throughout," one instructor pointed out to his cadets. Even after the assault, his discipline never wavered. Social media analysis firms tracked the dramatic shift in public sentiment. Screenshots of Vanessa's falling follower count went viral themselves, with real-time graphs showing her plummeting influence. Marketing agencies scrambled to distance themselves from her brand, releasing statements condemning her actions and terminating contracts. More significantly, a broader conversation had begun. Major publications ran opinion pieces about the intersection of tradition and social media culture. The Guardian, "When Clicks Meet Tradition, Lessons from Windsor." The Telegraph, "Digital Age versus Timeless Honor, A Modern Clash at an Ancient Castle." The Independent, "Beyond the Viral Moment, What Windsor Teaches Us About Respect." Veterans organizations rallied around the incident. The Royal British Legion issued a powerful statement. "Today's incident reminds us that the guards at our royal residences are not tourist attractions or social media props. They are serving members of His Majesty's Armed Forces, deserving of the same respect we accord to all who wear the uniform." Former guards began sharing their own stories of maintaining composure under provocation, though all agreed none had faced quite such a public challenge. Stonewall Bennett's nickname gained new life as memes compared his legendary stillness to Xander's composed response. Commander Blackwood's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Military colleagues, press officials, and documentary makers all wanted his perspective on his son's conduct. His response remained constant. He did exactly what every guard is trained to do: maintain dignity under pressure. The uniform demands nothing less. The young military cadet who had witnessed everything found his video being shared in military circles as an example of perfect protocol. His accompanying text, "This is what we train for. This is who we are," became a rallying cry for service members worldwide. In police custody, Vanessa's story took another turn. Her booking photo, showing her without filters or careful lighting, leaked online. The contrast between her carefully curated social media presence and this raw reality sparked yet another wave of commentary about authenticity in the digital age. But perhaps the most significant impact came from an unexpected quarter. Teachers across the country began using the incident in their lessons about citizenship and respect. One primary school teacher's viral post captured the educational moment perfectly. "Today, my students asked about the Windsor Castle video. Instead of showing them the assault, I showed them the guard's response. We talked about what real strength looks like, not in hitting back, but in standing firm." One student said, "It's like when you tell us to be the bigger person, but he did it in front of the whole world." Sometimes the best lessons come from unexpected places. Professional psychologists and behavioral experts appeared on news programs, analyzing the incident from various angles. Dr. Sarah Chen, a prominent social media psychologist, noted, "What we witnessed was more than just a clash between an influencer and a guard. It was a moment that forced us to confront our values in the digital age." The guard's response resonated so deeply because it reminded us that some principles stand unchanged, regardless of how many likes or shares are at stake. As night fell over Windsor Castle, the incident had already been viewed hundreds of millions of times across various platforms. But unlike typical viral moments that fade as quickly as they explode, this one seemed to grow more significant with each sharing. It wasn't just about an assault or a response. It had become a moment that caused people to reflect on their own relationship with tradition, respect, and the pursuit of digital fame. 1 week after the incident, Windsor Castle's East Wing witnessed another remarkable scene, though this one was marked by dignity rather than discord. Alexander Xander Blackwood stood at his post, as immaculate as ever, while a very different kind of crowd gathered to witness a special ceremony. The Chief of the General Staff, accompanied by Commander Blackwood and several high-ranking officers, approached the guard post with measured steps. In an unprecedented break from tradition approved by the palace itself, they were about to conduct a ceremony right there, at the exact spot where respect had triumphed over viral infamy. "Guard Blackwood," the chief announced, his voice carrying across the now hushed courtyard. "Your conduct on that day exemplified the highest standards of military service. Your response has become a model for guards across the Commonwealth, demonstrating that true strength lies not in reaction, but in unwavering dedication to duty." The commendation medal presented to Xander gleamed in the morning sun, not that he moved a muscle to acknowledge it. The ceremony concluded with him maintaining perfect form, the new medal adding to the dignity of his uniform rather than detracting from his discipline. Meanwhile, across London in a magistrate's court, Vanessa Sinclair faced the consequences of her actions. The verdict was decisive. 6-month suspended sentence, a substantial fine to be donated to military charities, and a lifetime ban from all royal properties. More significantly, she was ordered to produce a public video apology and attend courses on cultural respect and military history. Her mandatory apology video, posted without filters or editing, showed a transformed person. "I mistook tradition for entertainment," she admitted, her voice carrying genuine remorse. "What I failed to understand was that these guards represent something far more important than social media content. They represent centuries of dedication, honor, and service." The video went viral for very different reasons than her usual content. Comments flooded in praising her honesty and supporting her journey toward understanding. Several military history museums even invited her to learn about the traditions she had once mocked. Back at Windsor Castle, something else had changed. The white line before the guard post, once seen by many as merely a tourist boundary, had taken on new significance. Visitors now stopped several feet before it, explaining to their children in hushed voices about respect and tradition. Parents were overheard telling their kids, "Remember the story of the guard who showed that standing still can be stronger than any action." Commander Blackwood, watching his son from a distance, spoke quietly to Sergeant Major Hayes. "When I passed him my button, I hoped he'd honor the uniform. Never imagined he'd become a symbol of everything it represents." Hayes nodded, adding, "Some learn to wear the uniform, others are born to embody what it means. Your boy's the latter." Stonewall Bennett, who had witnessed everything from his post that fateful day, began training new guards using footage from the incident. "Notice," he would tell them, "how Guard Blackwood maintains his bearing even after the assault. That's not just training, that's character." The incident sparked lasting changes in social media policies at royal sites. New signs appeared at guard posts across all royal residences. "You are photographing serving members of His Majesty's Armed Forces. Respect the uniform. Honor the tradition." Major social media platforms implemented stricter policies against challenge videos involving military personnel. Educational programs evolved too. Schools across Britain incorporated the incident into their citizenship curriculum, using it to discuss the intersection of traditional values and modern media. One teacher reported that her students now played Palace Guard at recess, not mockingly, but with genuine attempts at disciplined stillness. The Palace gift shop even introduced a new postcard series, Guardians of Tradition. The bestseller showed Xander at his post, perfectly composed with the caption, "Strength stands silent." All proceeds went to military families' charities. A month after the incident, as Xander Blackwood stood his regular post, a group of young military cadets on a training visit snapped to attention as they passed. Their instructor explained quietly, "Remember this spot, recruits." This is where one guard reminded the world that our traditions aren't just for show, they're living proof of who we are and what we stand for. The final transformation came in an unexpected way. Social media influencers visiting royal sites began a new trend, posting respectful, educational content about the guards and their traditions. The hashtag #GuardianRespect accompanied millions of posts showing proper tourist behavior and appreciation for military protocol. As for Xander, his father's button still shone brightest among all his brass, a constant reminder that some things, dignity, duty, honor, never go out of style, no matter how many times the world tries to make them trend. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.